Hello everyone, it's time for the next Azur Archives. Previously, we went to the past to cover Crimson Echoes, and see where things all began for the Sakura's 1st Carrier Division. This time, Scherzo of Iron and Blood, the direct sequel to the Battle of the Denmark Strait from the tutorial. It's one of the few events based on history, being based on the hunt for the Bismarck detailing her downfall. So let's get started. Bismarck stands before her comrades rallying their cause. They have conserved their energy and will for this day. They have let many opportunities slip by, but now the time has come for them to show the world their strength and resolve. They shall expand their lands, marching onwards towards victory, for that is the principle on which the Iron Blood fleet and Crimson Axis will survive. Following the sinking of Hood, Eugen relays the situation to Bismarck. She asks they slow down and checks in on Biz's injuries. Biz claims she's fine, but is asked by Eugen to spare her the tough girl act. Eugen begins falling out of formation and refuses the order to stay, under the excuse of running on fumes, offering Bismarck to do the same. After all, it is her job to keep her leader from making reckless decisions. Shortly after, Eugen detects a pair of Royal Navy heavy cruisers, Suffolk and Norfolk. She sets off to play with their pursuers a bit, under orders to not overextend. Their forces are thin and the enemy knows where they are. Eugen drives them off and asks whether they should be expecting a Royal Navy fleet. However, Bismarck has changed her mind. Her injuries are worse than first thought and she needs to return for repairs. She will return straight to port while Eugen continues the mission alone. After placating Eugen's concerns of her getting attacked, the two begin to part, with Bismarck reminding Eugen that this is an order from the Iron Blood's fleet leader. She will not tolerate any of Eugen's typical behaviour. Bismarck had once conversed with Observer. She tells her that if things continue, Iron Blood will cease to exist. Their enemies will take everything they hold dear in a humiliating defeat, repeating what had happened once before. Bismarck is hard-pressed to believe her. Iron Blood is not so brittle. She even fires upon her. But Observer still continues to talk. Iron Blood has nothing the Sirens are interested in that they don't already have a better version of, or have taken. She spins that the Royal Navy are the threat to Iron Blood's existence, not the Sirens, and that is why they have given her power. Throughout the whole ordeal, Bismarck trembled. She had no choice but to accept such power. Victorious has spotted Bismarck and launches an airstrike on her, scoring a direct hit, but it doesn't slow her down. Once she's recovered her planes, she will launch a second one. King George is impressed by such durability, but if she manages to escape to Vichy waters, things will become difficult. She is informed by Victorious that Force H will be in contact with Bismarck in 30 minutes. Bismarck recalls her first meeting with U-556, where the little submarine had asked for her blessing, and how on the next day she would lend 556 her ceremonial band, and receive 556's official certificate of sponsorship as thanks. Seeing 556 depart with 557 has her wondering about tear pits. She is snapped back to reality by the arrival of Force H. They order her to cease. Bismarck engages Force H, but her mobility is crippled by Ark Royal swordfishes, and her location is radioed to the rest of the Royal Navy ships in the hunt. Despite this, Bismarck still chooses to stand her ground and fight. George's fleet catch up. She orders her to stand down and face trial. Bismarck deflects, asking if her heart knows the thrill of battle as a cutting-edge battleship. George tries to ask a second time, but is cut short by Bismarck's cannon fire. The two do battle for a short while until Rodney barges in and begins wailing on her. Their fun is further intruded on as a new opponent, Hester, makes herself known, targeting the Royal Navy. She asks Bismarck why he refuses to use the power gifted to her. After using it on Hood, Bismarck had an epiphany. There is no honour in beating an opponent this way, and that in doing so she had allowed the abyss to gaze back into her, slowly eating away at her wisdom cube. Tessa logs her response, and Bismarck fires upon her. Testa seeks authorization to activate the Awakening Protocol. The Royals begin blasting the sirens. Meanwhile, Testa tracks a rising energy level. A mist begins to spread across the battlefield, and the battle is pierced by a tremendous energy blast that melts through George's armour, following her sensing an ominous presence. She turns to find Bismarck, laughing like a madwoman, and quoting, "A great man once said, 'There is no God in this world. Even if there was, I would have slain him with my own hands.'" George is disappointed. She had hoped that Bismarck had some honour as a warrior, but now she has apparently shown her true colours. It seems her concerns were a waste, claiming that those of the Royal Navy would never sacrifice their dignity out of a fear of death. She moves to engage Bismarck one-on-one, calling her an honourless madwoman. The word honour seems to resonate with Bismarck. Bismarck cackles as the nearby siren warships are drawn in and crushed into dust as if going berserk. The energy continues to build until it reaches a climax, but instead of releasing towards the Royals, it explodes out in an attempt to self-destruct. Testa is somewhat surprised at Bismarck's ability to forcefully remove herself from the Awakening Protocol, and theorises they weren't able to synchronise with Biz's cube. Bismarck begins to make her last stand. She doesn't know what the sirens are plotting, but she won't allow it to defile her and her country. She won't fall into the Royal Navy's hands either, so she fires her last shot their way. It lands woefully short, but George gets the message, and orders all ships present to give her a warrior's send-off. As Bismarck sinks, she recalls a past conversation with Observer. One where Observer informs her that no matter what happens, the end result remains the same. She will not survive the battle. Her purpose was to wage war and sink meaninglessly. Bismarck does not want to know about herself, but rather her people. Observer inquires if there was a way to save her people. Would she shoulder that burden? Bismarck replies that she would die trying. The day she was given her name, her idea of self died. She is not afraid of her fate. Observer finds this amusing. She wants to see her dance once more. If you are able to transcend your limitations as Bismarck, and become one with your alter ego, perhaps then you may find your answer. She finally begins to fade into tranquility, sorry that she'll never get to meet her sister. Back on the ocean's surface, the Royals taste the bittersweet nectar of victory. George gives a speech urging her compatriots that should any of them find themselves in a similar position, they fight with the same tenacity they had witnessed today. Elsewhere, a little submarine comes chasing a signal. Upon realising it is Bismarck, she makes a mad dash to save her, recalling her promise. I, U-556, hereby declare before Neptune, Lord over oceans, seas, lakes, rivers, brooks, ponds and rivulets, that I will provide any desired assistance to my ally and lord, Battleship Bismarck, at any place on the water, underwater, on land or in the air. Signed, U-556, Parzival of the Seas. At the bottom, U-556 had made a drawing of herself towing her Lord Bismarck back to port. Far away, Testa and Observer discussed the results of their experiment. Testa was confused as to why Observer picked Bismarck to be the test subject, and she explains. Ironblood's defeat is a foregone conclusion. Despite how much evidence Observer brought to back it up, Bismarck would not be swayed. And that is the kind of mind Observer wanted to study. Someone far outside the statistical models. A potential key to awakening. But alas, it wasn't to be. And after waxing poetic for a while, the sirens begin preparations for their next experiment. This is the end of this little Scherzo cast in Iron and Blood. Bismarck has made her last stand and been put below the waves, defiant until the bitter end. For now, she'll be back. I believe this is one of the last times we see Testa. Her only other appearance I can recall is Daedalian Hymn, which is when I started. Here, the first seeds are planted for something very big. The anomalous awakening. It got mentioned once or twice back in Visitors, and I think Divergent Chessboard. But this is where it truly gets introduced, with the Siren's goal being to induce it within Bismarck, whatever the awakening may be. It feels like this was an event you had to be there for, and as previously mentioned, I was not. So this one doesn't make me feel as much as it probably should. Still one of the better events though. Next time, the Commander makes his return to the story, in the first modern-length major, Ashen Simulacrum. So until then, fair winds and following seas.